My name is Joe Owen. I'm an expert on leadership. I write about it, I talk about it, and I even do it. In this programme, I'm going to help a head teacher with the sort of leadership challenge many schools face. Filsham Valley is a fully inclusive, comprehensive school near Hastings. 3 years ago, the school needed to improve its performance radically. A new head teacher was brought in. Since Chris Kelly came, the results have greatly improved. But after 3 years at Filsham, Chris is still struggling to find the right staff.
The challenge for me was to start to attract the sort of people that we wanted to take the school forward.
The other side of the recruitment coin is retention. Last year, Chris had nearly 40% staff turnover.
I think people perhaps have been unhappy working here.
So socially, I don't think it's not as good as other schools.
I know that we have a lot of staff who just stay for a year and then go.
Something's not quite right.
You can't manage your staff unless you know what's going on in their lives outside work.
So I actually don't want to know things that are going on that are in their private lives unless it impacts on work.
I'm not sure I agree with you.
Time to find out if Planet Business and Planet Education will collide or collaborate. Chris has set herself the following exam question. How do I improve recruitment? In business, you don't answer the question, you challenge it to make sure you've been set the right one. So what is the problem? Recruitment or retention? Companies compete for customers. But behind this visible war, there's another invisible war being fought. The war for talent. The equation is simple. Get the best talent in, get the best results out. Is the same true for schools?
Good morning, Joe.
How many positions have you had to fill in the last year?
Over the course of the year, we've probably had to replace, I would say it's 12 posts. It's not so much the volume as the key significance of those posts, because we're seeking to replace, in some cases, middle leaders. And it's extremely difficult to get experienced staff. It's not difficult to get new staff, but getting people to come into the school who are experienced teachers to take up leadership posts and to have the sort of innovative skills that we're looking for is a real challenge. We very seldom have a field of people we would want to interview of greater than 2 or 3 candidates, very rarely, and for some posts there are no applicants at all.
Right, that's a pretty clear challenge. Chris tells me she thinks the problem is recruitment. But is it? Should she focus on recruiting new staff or retaining existing staff? To answer that, I need to find out why so many staff are leaving in the first place.
We're working with some very, very challenging students and challenging families. So therefore it's by no means any cakewalk working in a school like this.
One thing I do think at Filsham Valley, more than other schools I've been at, is that it can be very hard to establish yourself.
One of the factors could be that when one person goes, often other people see it as their time to go, especially if they've been here for a little while.
At first, the answers pointed in every direction, but as I kept on digging, a pattern started to emerge.
The comments I've heard are that it's not quite so sociable maybe. They've changed our break times, so we only have half-hour first break, half-hour for lunch.
People find it difficult to comprehend change, and changes have happened a lot in the last 2 years.
Some things have happened and we've not found out about it until quite late on.
It's almost like too many changes are made.
I think people perhaps have been unhappy working here.
And I think just having people be a bit like, come and knock on your door and come and have a coffee, or just try to get people out, would maybe improve people's spirits really, and see if that would just make it a nicer day really.
Too much change and too little communication seem to be the big issues. Communication means getting out there. As John le Carré wrote, a desk is a dangerous place from which to view the world. Time to ditch the desk. Recruiting obviously is related to retention, because if you get the right people in, then actually they will want to stay. And a very common mistake in business is people are recruited just for skills, and then you find the values are wrong and they have to leave, and it's very messy on both sides.
I think the values are critically important. However, I also know that when I've got a field of one, having advertised 3 times, that if the person can walk and stand up, that's probably going to have to be enough.
When we were talking to the staff, not surprisingly, the staff feel most comfortable talking about the tangible things. That's safe territory for people to talk about. And I'm not sure it's really getting through to the heart and emotionally to where people are at. We were getting hints of it, though, when people started talking about change. We heard a little bit around the challenges of coming into a new working environment where you don't have a network, you don't have the relationships, and so they need to be pulled into the community at a personal level, and they also need to be pulled in professionally with lots of that professional support as well. The killer question when we did a survey in my previous company of what made a good boss is often, does my boss really care for me? Now, you have a huge challenge here with 64 staff. It's very difficult to show that you care personally for each member of staff. Now, there are 2 possible ways forward. One is make sure your senior leadership team can really do this, but actually your staff really want to know you as well. It's the oldest story in the book that prevention is better than cure and retention is better than recruiting. Maybe the best thing is not talk about it in theory, but see it in practice. Well, let's see if we can set that up. So Chris really needs to talk to her staff and let them know how much they are valued. Perhaps meeting a business leader who has faced and overcome the challenge of recruitment and retention would really help her. I'm taking Chris as far away from a head teacher's office as is possible to a plant hire business in Andover. 2 years ago, Sian Wycherley took over as General Manager at GE Equipment Services Plant Hire, a business employing over 320 people all over the UK. The company had just been bought by General Electric and faced huge staff turnover. But in less than 18 months, Sian has managed to halve the number of people leaving. Let's see what Chris can pick up from Sian's experience.
Hi.
Sian, very good to see you again.
Hi, Joe.
Can I introduce Chris to you?
Nice to meet you. Hi, nice to meet you. Do you want to come in through the office?
Please, thank you. The situation when you arrived, how many staff were there and what was the attrition level that you faced?
We had about 300 staff and the attrition rate was in excess of 40%.
That's huge.
So it's a massive problem, not only in terms of training, but also in terms of recruitment costs. The pressures that it then puts on the staff who stay and are loyal. They end up working longer hours and you get increases in sickness rates, and so it goes on.
How did you unpick that? How did you get to the bottom of that?
Everybody who knows me knows the first thing in the morning I have to put a kettle on. So it's like you get into work, let's have a cup of tea. If there's a crisis, you put the kettle on, which is what we tend to do in Wales a lot. And we had the idea that it's no good going out and sitting down with a workshop fitter and saying, tell me what your problems are, because they think that I'm someone from this ivory tower in head office. They're not going to talk to me very easily. So it's what is the forum for sitting down and having a chat with somebody and making sure that they feel comfortable enough to talk to you. So we came out with the idea of having time for tea. And the thought was that I would go and visit every single site across the UK. So we have site, the furthest north is Inverness, down to St Austell, over to Kent. And I would have a cup of tea with every individual in the business. So I had to earn the respect and the loyalty of the staff. and they needed to realise that when they told me something, I would take it seriously and I would do something about it.
So how do you spend sufficient time with people and make them feel sufficiently relaxed to really let you know what's going on so that you can support them? Because I actually don't want to know things that are going on that are in their private lives unless it impacts on work, because I do think it's important that people have their own arenas. So just explore that with me a bit.
I'm not sure I agree with you,
Okay.
because I don't want to be nosy and I don't want to pry into people's lives. But I think you need to understand the background. Because the other thing is you need to understand why people come to work.
Yes.
Because it's not always money. And one of the things I learnt many years ago, because I came to work for money, and I thought everyone did. And then you find out that it's not all about money at all. You can't manage your staff unless you know what's going on in their lives outside work. And if you've got a problem member of staff and their husband's dying of cancer and things like that, and you don't know, and you find out afterwards, it's just awful. And most people don't say in work, they come to work to get away from the problems, not to talk about it. But you really need to know what's going on. And you know, my time for tea again, there was a fitter who he was telling me that he loved the job and it was fantastic, and it was the only thing that kept him going. He was 58, 59. Only thing that kept him going after his wife died. And I said, when did your wife die? And he said, 3 weeks ago. I thought, God, we didn't know that. And he didn't have a day off for the funeral or anything. I was just, sorry, I get upset with things like that.
I think that's so true. You're talking about actively, as part of your strategy, getting under the skin of people who some of whom may be reluctant to say very much about themselves.
But you were saying that perhaps it's you.
Yes, I think maybe it is. The majority wouldn't know very much about me as an individual. I would guess that some of my staff don't know whether or not I'm married, for example.
I find that unbelievable.
And they certainly, the majority would not know, apart from my senior leadership team, would not know anything about my relationship with children, you know, in family terms, or anything like that.
But do you think they see you as a real person then? Or just somebody who's there, you know, cardboard cutout, comes in, you know, does the work and then goes home again?
Well, I guess some do. They must, I would guess. One of the things I do, I have a head teacher surgery on a regular basis. And one or two people might come along, but often nobody comes at all. And the door's open and there's tea and cakes. Okay. And I say to people at the beginning of the week, and it's published in advance, you know, just come along, just have a chat, have a moan, whatever.
But you're doing it on your territory, aren't you? So if I said, come to Bristol and see me, it's never going to happen.
Just ask maybe one thing to maybe push us a little bit. Time for tea, tips and tactics, okay? Because you obviously get a lot out of the time for tea. Just talk us through how you actually do one of those time for teas that gets people to talk. I mean, where do you have tea? Yeah, are people scheduled at half-hour intervals, or do you just? I mean, how does it work?
Turn up at the depot, and then it depends who you're seeing. So with one of the fitters, I'd probably go into their mess room. I'd probably sit on the edge of the desk. I'd probably swear a little bit. I'd probably talk about football or whatever until they start talking. So you will get some cantankerous people who say, I haven't got anything to say. And you go, come on, don't give me that. You know, what are you unhappy about? When you go to the pub on a Friday night, what do you have a moan about? What do you say? That flaming woman, guess what she's done now? What annoys you? And then they can't resist but tell you.
Well, Sian certainly talks the talk. Time for tea sounds good, but were there any tangible results on the shop floor? Any particular examples from the last few years, from the small to the large?
Yeah, for these guys, I mean, it's some of the simple stuff. The mobile fitters, they keep their livelihood in the vans. Their tools, I mean, some of their tools are worth a fortune to them. If they lose that, they lose their livelihood. We sort of got a discussion group from them. tool insurance was an issue. Sian listened to them at the tea time talks, and that was implemented literally within days.
But now we've got access to talk to upper management, that it has forced people to look at what we're saying.
Right.
And help us. Okay. Because at the end of the day, we're the people that supply the product to make the company work.
Back in her office, I asked Sian whether these changes had cost her a lot of money.
It didn't. No, it didn't. It didn't cost us very much. One of the things that has cost us a lot of money is panicking. So we've got 20 open positions and we have a business to run. So let's just get bums on seats. And we have taken the conscious decision not to employ everyone at all costs.
The message is that Chris needs to do some serious listening to her staff. But will she take on board Sian's advice? Today we looked at diggers, recruitment, retention. What do you learn?
Well, there's just so much there, isn't there? Just so much to think about and learn. But what came across really strongly from Sian, in relation to recruitment certainly, was that it's not about policies and procedures. It's actually having a value set that puts people at the centre of it. And I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, certainly about retention of staff. And one of the things that I'm going to do is launch my coffee campaign and make sure that I spend time with every one of my staff before the year's out. It's really important to do that. That's absolutely crucial.
I like the idea of putting people first, so treating teachers as people, not as professional grunts grinding out the grades. That'll be a change, hopefully, for some of them.
Yes, and I think, I would like to think that we do some of that, but I don't think that we put enough emphasis on that. I think we do think about grades, we think about performance tables, we think about all of those things first, and we really need to make sure that people are a priority.
And all of that's meant to help retention. The question is, how are you going to show it?
Well, if we get it right, if I act on what I've learned and actually implement some of those ideas, we should see some clear results in a very short period of time. So come back in a month's time and have a look.
We'll look forward to it. It's the start of a new term and it's been 6 weeks since we last met. Chris says she's had over 30 coffee campaign meetings, but what has she found out? At General Electric, Sian used the time for tea chats to get the staff to tell her what really bothers them. It's not an easy skill to acquire, but if Chris is going to get her very real retention problem under control, it's a skill she has to learn. I'm going back to Chris to see what she's really learned from our time together. What's happened since then?
I launched the coffee campaign and have spoken to around 30 people.
Okay, just on the coffee campaign, let's explore this a little bit further. What we found at GE was people often identify quite small and trivial things, but things that can make a big difference to how they feel about where they're working. What are some of the things that you've been finding from these coffee conversations?
Well, some good messages really. Nobody has come back to say that they're concerned or unhappy. So no, there haven't been those magic moments, but they may yet to come.
I feared that might be her answer. So earlier, I went to the staff room for my own time for tea chats to see if there really is anything that annoys them. What are the little irritants that get under your skin? What are the annoying things that get under your skin or the skin of your colleagues that maybe could be changed or improved?
I think the lack of time that we have at breaks and lunch. I think because they're doing a 30-minute policy, so we have first break, which is 30 minutes, and second break, which is also 30 minutes, means that your lunch break is non-existent. because you're having to deal with students that haven't done homework, so setting detentions, or little things about, like your tutor group wants to go into into their rooms to use your lockers, and all those types of little things that do mean that a 30-minute lunch break actually means you've got 5 minutes to scoff down some food as quickly as you can.
I suppose there is a lack of communication. The lines of communication don't seem to be that clear, and there's certain things that have happened in the past that the teachers who are really on the coalface don't find out about until last minute, and that is very, very irritating, and we don't necessarily have that much say in it either.
You hear the same old sort of chestnuts, lack of support from senior staff, lack of support from SLT, behaviour of the pupils, and I think sometimes it's certainly about, if I feel supported, I work better. Whether or not things actually change, I just feel much better in myself.
All right, so if there was one simple thing that Chris could do more or less from now to make things easier and better for staff, what might that be?
I would say it would be to do again with communicating with staff. I think when I used to be a long time ago when I was at school, the head teacher was seen much more out and about school and talking to pupils, talking to staff. Chris does do that, but I think the job has changed so much. It's much more like a more a managing director's job now. It's much more business orientated. But I think, and I've said this before, I think head teachers should teach a bit more as well.
I think if schools are able to maintain sort of the laptops for teachers scheme, which shouldn't be a problem anyway, but I think sort of updating equipment would be useful.
I think something that we do well, that I've got in the science department especially, is that we've got what we call the meeting room, which is lovely because we've got our fridge and our kettle and our toaster and our drawers to keep all our food in, and it's great, and we go there at break time. It's right next door to my classroom, literally 2-minute walk round, make my coffee, have my lunch, and all of us meet up and have a chat and discuss what's gone on, what's good stuff for the day, what bad things have happened. And it's a great place for us to meet. And I know for a fact that that isn't the case around the whole school. Not every department has got that facility where they can go and chat and all sit together.
Very small things, like I have been very annoyed if I've gone to speak to people who I consider my boss and they wouldn't look up from their laptop. You see teachers all day long absolutely glued to their laptop like some sort of umbilical cord, and they won't look up and give you the time of day. And even if you're thinking, oh goodness, no, not now, I don't want to speak to this person now, it's important that you look up, and it's like customer service, isn't it? You look up and you make sure you are ready there for them to listen, and if you can't listen to them then, you make sure you arrange a time when you can.
In a few brief chats, I've heard some of the things that are bothering staff, and I'm sure there's plenty more. I wonder if Chris has picked up on any of this from her coffee campaign. You'll not be surprised to hear that when we've talked to some people, they were saying, oh, communications,
Yes.
We never hear anything until it's far too late. Yes. And we're not involved in making the decisions. We don't feel we've got any ownership over it. And actually, if they just involved us earlier, we could help them get a better solution. Now, are they being unreasonable? Is that history? Are things changing? What's your reaction to that?
No, I think that they're being very reasonable. We used to have daily staff briefings in the morning. We've stopped having those because people felt that they would much rather, for example, be with their classes getting ready for that, with which I concur. But the downside of that means that there's less sort of face-to-face contact with large groups of staff, and that it may be that we need to review that again.
So one of the things we talked about at G, or one of the things you took away from G, was the whole issue of recruiting to values. What's happened there?
Well, one of the things that we've done is to revamp our brochure, and we now have what we think is a much more modern feel brochure, which very clearly lets people know what we're about. It talks about our sort of key themes, which is about making education real, succeeding together, being part of a modern, vibrant team running a 21st century school.
If I was a new teacher, and in the extremely unlikely event that you wanted to recruit me here, what would be the 3 or 4 words that you would want me to be taking away?
Well, it's interesting. We were interviewing this morning, and that question was central, actually, to what we were testing for. And what we wanted were people that were committed to the very highest standards, who were committed to inclusive education, and finally that it was an organisation that would provide challenge but would also on the other side of that provide support.
And from a personal perspective, if there's one thing you got out of GE and Planet Business, what would that be?
Revealing a little more of myself. And it was very interesting talking to Sian about her approach with staff. And although I do think that there are professional boundaries which are particularly important in schools because we work with young people and we work with vulnerable young people, I think it's been useful for me to think, well, actually, you know, perhaps I do need to spend a little bit more time just chatting with my staff on occasions.
That's great. Very human, very simple. Let's be positive and say the glass is half full for Chris. She's working on recruiting and she's got a new brochure and she's stopped hiring on panic.
When you did ask me in June, I probably said that the issue was actually about recruitment, which it is, but we also need to get better at valuing and developing the staff that we have.
With Chris focused on recruiting, has she got the time to focus on retention as well? Perhaps this is an opportunity for another member of her senior leadership team, because all good leaders know that leadership is a team sport. It's easy in theory, but it's tough in practice, and that's her challenge.